Hi guys, Traci here with E&R Business Solutions. Today I'm going to talk to you about business process management, BPM for short. Process improvement is key in business excellence. Your organization can only reach its full potential when your processes are as effective as they can be. Every improved process is progress. Even if you only make one process at a time, you will make your business more effective and in time be able to make more money. Everything in business is related to time and money. If you've ever heard me speak, you definitely have heard me say that. Anything you do is going to cost you time, whether it's you individually or your employees. Anything you can do to increase the amount of processes that you have to reduce the amount of time it takes somebody to do something, the more money you will make in the long run. Let's talk about business process management, or BPM. Creating this diagram or process will help you save money. Creating a BPM diagram is the first step in creating your process. Let's discuss how to create a BPM diagram. I am going to discuss a very simple way to create this chart for this process. Remember, this is just a diagram you're creating. The rest is where you're going to implement. But right now, we're just making a design and a diagram on how you're going to accomplish a task regarding the first process you want to take on. BPM is actually where you can use various designs to actually come up with ways to work through your process. But we're going to work through a simple one for those of you that never heard of BPM. All right, as I said, we're going to design one of the more simple processes for BPM. One thing I want you to think about though is business process management is very different than project management. We are going to discuss processes. Project management specifically has to do with a project specifically, or a task or a group of tasks that you have within your business. So you're probably saying, well, how is that different than a business process? The difference is business processes are holistic to your business. For example, we're going to discuss how you can work through the process of digitizing documents. We're not talking about one document. We're not talking about one project. We're not talking about one task. We're talking about holistically in your business, how can you mitigate using paper documents and working towards digitizing all of your documentation. That is how you have a business process versus thinking about project management. I just wanted to make that clear because sometimes that can be very confusing. All right, let's start designing. It happens to be that the first step to the model we're going to create is design. As an example, let's say you have a problem with documentation. You have way too much paperwork that you have to deal with all the time. Let's think about ways and processes you could take in order to have that documentation flow better. In the design section, you'll go through ways that you could possibly work through your documentation better. Can you digitize? Can you create a way to have workflow process better with your documents? Would digitizing your documentation be the best process? Okay, let's talk about your documentation. In the design section, you would look at the documentation you currently have and ways that you can better work through a plan on digitization, if that's what you want to do with it. There are ways you can do it by keeping the documents you have now. You don't have to necessarily digitize. I'm just using that as an example, as a resource for you to understand how to create this model. Let's say you decide that you do want to look at your documentation and ways that you can better have a workflow. Think about the ways that you currently use your processes. Think about what you currently do with your documentation. How does it flow? Where does it go? Do you just hand people documents when you need them to be signed? Are there better processes you could take? That's what you do in the design section. You run through all the different ways that you can mitigate the process that you're currently using and make something quicker and easier. You don't need to find the resolution right now because that's why you have 3 other steps in this design process. Right now, you're just thinking about the problem you have. That's basically it. Run through what the problem is with your documentation and itemize what you're doing now and possibly what you might want to do with it in the future. Be mindful that BPM is not a fixed product. This is something you're going to create. I like to call them living documents. This is something you're going to change over time. We're going to create a plan, and then over time, if you see these items aren't actually working, you can quickly change them or easily change them if you find new paths to take to make it quicker, make it easier, saving time and making more money. Let's just take a minute to discuss the BPM process. We created the beginning. We started with what the problem was and ultimately what can you do to fix it, right? The model, which is the second step, is the part where you go into detail about backward planning on how do we fix the problem. Your problem was that you have too many papers in your office. Well, that's my problem. Too many papers in your office. And you want to become somebody that's more digital. You want to get your documentation to that step. So in the model step of your BPM, you're going to now backward plan how you're going to get there. So you now see on the end, you want to be digitized. In the beginning, you have a lot of hard copy papers. What do you need to do to get there? This living document will help you see the steps that you need to take, even though you're backward planning, because you're really going to the end and you're going to go back to the beginning to your hard copy paper, right? So you know you want to digitize documentation. You're going to figure out what do you need to do to get there. Do you need hard drives, external hard drives, or cloud space? What are you going to do to make all the documents you have digital at that point, and what steps do you need to take to get there? That's what your model step is going to show. You can even draw a diagram if you want to break up the steps that need to happen, so that way if you have other people helping you get there, they can see what they need to do through the diagram you've created. Let's just take a minute to discuss the BPM process. We created the beginning. We started with what the problem was and ultimately what can you do to fix it, right? The model, which is the second step, is the part where you go into detail about backward planning on how do we fix the problem. Your problem was that you have too many papers in your office. Well, that's my problem. Too many papers in your office. And you want to become somebody that's more digital. You want to get your documentation to that step. So in the model step of your BPM, you're going to now backward plan how you're going to get there. So you now see on the end, you want to be digitized. In the beginning, you have a lot of hard copy papers. What do you need to do to get there? This living document will help you see the steps that you need to take, even though you're backward planning, because you're really going to the end and you're going to go back to the beginning to your hard copy paper, right? So you know you want to digitize documentation. You're going to figure out what do you need to do to get there. Do you need hard drives, external hard drives, or cloud space? What are you going to do to make all the documents you have digital at that point, and what steps do you need to take to get there? That's what your model step is going to show. You can even draw a diagram if you want to break up the steps that need to happen, so that way if you have other people helping you get there, they can see what they need to do through the diagram you've created. The next step is implementation. It gets a little confusing because you just got done backward planning what you're going to do. Hopefully you made a diagram to get you there. If you did, it should be easier to implement. It should be easy to get you to the next level of actually implementing the work that you want to have done. What you need to think about is, what do you want to do to execute to that next step? How do you want to get there? You created a process in your model section and backward plan, but what do you want to do to get there? Are you going to use employees to help you digitize your documentation? Or are you going to work through the process yourself? That's what this part is. It is called implementation because you do implement or execute the next level. But in your planning phase of your PPM, you want to identify what you're going to do in that phase. Right now you're just planning. So what are you going to do in the execute or implementation phase to actually get you to fruition, actually get you to digitization? So you got to sit down when you're making this design and you have to think about how are you actually going to get there. Okay, the final step is monitor. You've done all the work. You've done all the planning. You've done backward planning. You now know how you're going to execute. Once you're done with your diagram, you put everything into motion, you get everything started, and once it's all in motion, you can now simply monitor the work being done. In the process of monitoring, though, be mindful to watch and see the steps that are happening from your plan to see if it's actually reducing time, reducing employee need, or reducing space in your office, reducing those files. It is important, even in something as simple as digitizing your documentation, that you track progress, that you track improvements. Because if you're spending time digitizing, but it's not really doing anything to help your business, you don't want to spend the time to do it. There are many processes in every single business that can utilize the BPM process. It is not just digitization. This is just something I use as an example, so that way you have something to work through when you're creating this on your own. Be mindful, start out with that diagram. Take a piece of paper and scribble next to each one of the steps what you could work through in each step, in each design, in execution, and even in monitor. How can you improve? How can you change? Remember, this is a living document. That final step that I just discussed is also called optimization. If you really want to get to the next level, you need to make sure that you're tracking changes, you're tracking updates, you're tracking what you're actually doing to make this process better. It can also sometimes help you generate better processes for your clients and customers. If you are doing digitization, you have better products that you can simply email to somebody for them to sign. You can put them on your website for somebody to easily find. Remember, a well-executed BPM can produce benefits for your business as a whole. It can reduce wasted time. It can help you see the errors that you might currently have in your workflow. It can also generate better processes for your clientele. Now, take your diagram and your plan and make it happen. Remember to prioritize, reorganize, and become more efficient. Now that we've gone through all that, I'm hoping that you understand what a BPM is, how you can work through a simple process, and how it can help you and your business. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding the video or anything else, feel free to reach out via email or go to our website and set up a free consultation for anything you might want to ask us about.